But anyway, so I wanted to hold this meeting because there was a lot of questions regarding, why they were doing the normal acreage and yield and that sort of stuff in October versus we're in September versus October. And so I called Brad, and he kind of gave me a little bit of an answer. And then I got a lot of questions, regarding like how the information is gathered, what's NASS use as far as their methods for gathering information, things of that nature. And so I just want to start by introducing Brad. Brad is you're the director of the Heartland. How many states do you cover, Brad?
I cover 2 states, Missouri and Illinois. Yep.
Okay. All right. And so I guess let's just start like just give everyone a quick overview of what you do.
Okay, well, I'm a regional director for NASS. I have a math background. I'm a statistician, but my job is to oversee a staff of about 30 full-time employees and about 120 part-time employees. And we ultimately set the estimates for our states of Missouri and Illinois, whether it's corn and soybeans, like came out in our report today, cattle, hogs, sheep, you name it, the full gamut. We collect data from farmers in our 2 states, set the estimates for Missouri and Illinois. Those get passed to our headquarters in Washington, D.C., and then they package that together into a national release like you saw with the crop production report today.
And why did they change from October to September on that FSA data? I mean,
so FSA, farmers sign up. I think July 15th is the cutoff date. But then you can sign up late, I think, for a small fine. And then FSA compiles that database as quickly as they can. And for whatever reason, they've just gotten it together a little quicker this year. And I don't know if it's because we had a really good planting season and farmers got stuff planted earlier than usual, or they've just gotten more efficient at putting that data into their database. It's a good chance there's a combination of the two. But the bottom line is they were able to package it together a little quicker this year than they have historically. And we want to be as real time and as efficient as possible in putting our numbers out. So we decided that the data was mature enough to go ahead and open that door to look at acreage this month as opposed to next month. And so that's what we did.
And you're going to take a second look next month, correct?
That's right. Yep.
All right. What was your take on the release of the data from the FSA a couple days early?
It was a little surprising, a little disappointing, I'll be honest. And like we talked about earlier, I don't know for sure what happened. My guess is somebody was testing a procedure for Friday and didn't realize that it was live. And it was only up for a few minutes, but that's all it took for some people to find it and pull it down. Fortunately, as our report shows today, there weren't a lot of major changes in the acreage. So I know it made some people nervous, but ultimately between the acreage changes and the yield changes, we're up a couple percent for corn and 1% for soybeans. So and I hear the markets hasn't tanked, so that's generally a good thing.
Yeah, we entered about 18 higher in beans and about 6.5 in corn. Wheat was 6 higher and 6 higher in Minneapolis, about even in Kansas City, and down just a touch in Chicago. So no major changes there either. But are we going to start seeing changes like this more common, or is this just kind of a fluke deal?
You mean taking a look at acreage in September in the future?
Yeah.
I really I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure how they were able to get it together quicker this year. My hope is yes, because I think generally it's a good thing. Again, we want our numbers to be as real time as possible. So if they can get that data together, quickly in the future, we will absolutely use it, and I hope it does continue.
How about, hey, can you talk a little bit about how the reports are gathered from kind of start to finish?
Sure.
Not just this one, but all the WASDs.
Yeah, so for the crop production reports, for example, this one we just finished for September, we really have about 3 indications as far as the yield goes. Now the acreage, we just looked at FSA data. We set our acreage earlier from surveys that we did in June. And so with the FSA data available, that is a really, really solid indication, because north of 90% of farmers in the Corn Belt sign up for FSA programs. So we know our numbers need to be closely aligned with what they are getting from farmers. So that's the number one source that we looked at for the acreage. Now, as far as yield, we really have 3 different sources we look at. We do a survey of farmers. We have a list of known farmers in every state, and we will sample from that list. And for example, my 2 states of Missouri and Illinois, we sampled 327 farmers in Missouri and 335 farmers in Illinois. And we just call them or visit them or send them an invitation to respond on the internet. We have a number of modes that they can respond, but we just ask them, okay, assuming normal weather conditions between now and when you get to harvest your crop, what do you think your yield's going to be? It's a real simple survey. Only takes a couple minutes. And so from that sample of farmers, we can summarize that data and then extrapolate for the universe. And then we get an indication as to what we think the yield's going to be. So that's one indication. We also do an objective yield survey where we randomly select actual fields, and we send part-time employees out, and they mark off a plot in these fields. They count plants. They look at certain attributes of the crop. And then eventually, as the grain gets more mature, they send samples of that grain into a lab that we have in St. Louis. And we measure that grain for weight, for moisture. And then we plug that into a model. And that's called our objective yield indication, because as the name implies, it is without human intervention. The crop is speaking for itself. And then thirdly, we have satellite images that we use as an indication of yield as well. Now, people ask me, well, which one do you look at the most? We look at all 3, but I would have to say the majority of our weight and our consideration goes to the farmers that we talk to. We just find that as of right now, 2021, there's no better source of setting an indication of a commodity than the people who are out there growing them and know more about them than anybody else. So we still rely heavily on farmer input.
I got you. How's the satellite imaging coming along? Like, where do you guys see that as far as?
It's coming along. That the images are getting better all the time. The resolution continues to improve. There are some challenges with satellite images. Our estimates try to reflect the first of the month. Okay, so when these satellites do flyovers, obviously you have to have a clear day to get an image at all. So sometimes if you don't have a clear day, if you have cloudy weather for several days, you don't get images. Or maybe it's partly cloudy and you just get partial images. So that's one challenge you have with satellite imagery. Another is just ground truthing it. And that's where our research is just continuing to evolve. But, we get images and we get these high resolution, pixels, and we're getting better and better all the time at using those images to check against what's actually on the ground, because ultimately we have to make sure that those 2 data points align. Whatever the images we get and what we think we're seeing through that, we have to make sure that's aligning with what's actually being produced on the ground. And that is just taking time and research. but we've been doing this for a number of years, and we just that process continues to evolve, and we anticipate that getting better and better in the future.
I got you. What as far as satellite imaging, how big of a portion of that is how much of that is weighted in on the yield?
Well, again, the number one indicator right now is the farmers that we talk to.
Yeah.
And I would say the objective yield survey and satellite imagery are second and third. Probably a little more weight objective yield, because again, we're getting firsthand information from the crop. And then the satellite image is probably our third most popular, reliable indication. We try and look at all three. We love it when all three come together and point to the same number. It's not an exact science, so that they often don't point to the same number. So we try to find a happy median or compilation of the three, and try and just make sure we're choosing a number that makes sense.
You said something about, you said that you had like 350 people in Missouri and Illinois. Is that pretty universal for every state, like Nebraska, for example, or?
For a ag yield survey, yes. Yeah. And again, it's going to depend on the state, and ultimately how many farmers, how many corn and soybean farmers there are in that state. But ultimately, you want to pick a number that accurately presents the whole population you're trying to project from. But that's probably pretty good approximation for the other states as well.
I got you. Have you guys, since 2019, you guys got pulled out of that Pro Farmer Crop Tour, have you felt some more pressure to I guess be more accurate or friendly to the farmers? After that, I guess someone made a death threat.
Yeah, somebody got a death threat. Apparently there were some people weren't real happy about some of the numbers that we put out that year. I think we would be back on the crop tour now if it wasn't for COVID. Our biggest problem now about getting out and interfacing with the public is just COVID, and the government has been pretty restrictive about us getting out. And I would love to be out more. I would love to be interacting with people face to face, but the current administration kind of wants the government to be more in the leader's role as far as preventing any outbreaks of COVID. And you can imagine, what if a government employee went to an event and spread COVID to a bunch of farmers, the headlines and the PR, that negative PR. So that's our biggest issue right now, is just COVID. But we love to be out. I missed the Farm Progress show for the first time this year since I've been to St. Louis. I hated that, but as soon as we get that restriction lifted, we anticipate being out as much as ever before.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, hey, I was going to ask if anyone had any questions or anything like that. I mean, I got more, but I was going to open it up. Nothing. The other thing, I guess the other thing we talked about the other day, Brad, was the correlation between like crop progress and yield. It seems like with the good to excellent rating being, the gap is closed on corn, but still in beans it's still pretty wide. I mean, how much weight do you put in that crop progress with that weekly?
I like to use analogies, Mark, and one of the reasons we do what we do is to provide a level playing field. And we give everybody who's interested in buying or selling grain the same information at the same time in the same manner. And I like to compare it to buying and selling an automobile. If you're going to sell, I think you drive an F-150, don't you, Mark?
No.
No? if you're going to sell your vehicle, whatever vehicle you have, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to do some research. You're going to try and find out what it's worth, so you can get an idea what to ask for it, what you think you can get.
Yeah.
And you do that by going to independent sources like Kelley Blue Book or Auto Trader or things like that. The person buying your truck is going to do the same things. They want to know what they can expect to pay for it. So we kind of feel like we are that source for agricultural commodities, so that everybody kind of knows, what they have, what it's worth, or if they're buying it, what they're going to expect to pay for it, and so forth and so on. The crop progress report would be kind of like me driving by your house and seeing your vehicle in the driveway. And I can see it, I can see what year it is, I can see if it has rust or not on it, but I'm just doing a quick visual observation of it. The surveys that we do would be more like me getting in the vehicle, popping the hood, looking at the engine, taking it for a test drive, doing a much, much more thorough investigation of that vehicle, and getting a much, much better assessment as to its condition. So that's really the difference between the two. The crop progress survey, we're asking on average 1 or 2 people in a county what they think about the crop. There a huge percent of our folks who respond are county extension agents. And so, and depending on what week it is, they may have been all over the county, or they may have just driven between their home and their office that week. So it's an opinion survey that's based on a fairly small sample, as opposed to the ag yield survey we do, where we're contacting hundreds of people who farm for a living and know much more about the crop and have much more insight into what's going on. So hopefully they correlate. They should, there should be some, but we do not look at the crop progress numbers when we set our estimates, because it is an opinion survey, and it's kind of a nice thing to kind of keep people apprised as to what it looks like is going on out there from a week-to-week basis. But this is a much more thorough look, the surveys that we do, and it should be a little more accurate representation as to what's going on.
I know you use your farmer surveys and satellite and whatnot. Do you guys take into consideration like the fertilizer shortage and things like that?
So what we ultimately try to focus on is the end product, and the end product being acres that are harvested and the yield that comes from that crop. Now, when we go to ask a farmer, what do you think the yield is going to be for your crop? Or when we get to like December, we're asking, what was the yield of your crop? That answer should be taking into account all of those factors: fertilizer, seed population, technology used, chemicals, all of that. So we don't get in the weeds and say, oh, we had a shortage of fertilizer this year, or we had this, that, or the other condition. We go straight to the person producing the end product and ask them what the result of that production was, and that should reflect whatever conditions or practices led into that.
I got you. So that's pretty much every question I had, besides this last one. What's the October report going to say?
If I knew that, I'd be a very, very wealthy person, because I could predict the future. But I will say, that's one of the reasons why we do these things every month from August through December, is things can change. I know one of your questions that you sent me asked about, well, how does how does hurricanes and things like that affect what we do? Well, one of the reasons we do these things every month is things can change. You can get weather, you can get different things that affect the crop. And so every estimate we set, every report that we come out with is a snapshot in time. And as soon as that snapshot is taken, we put it in the history books and we're looking forward. You know, it's kind of like, you know, we're going to open NFL football this weekend. As soon as one game's over, you know, they try to put that out of their mind. They're focusing on the next one. Try to learn from it, but that's kind of what we do. Is you know, we every estimate we set should be our best professional opinion as to what is going on at that particular time. And as soon as it's over, we're looking to the next one and what has changed from the last one that we set. So that's really why we do it and how we do it.
You see the lack of buying out of China, or just, you know, in comparison to last year, even, I think we had like 50, 60 straight days of China, or not China, but someone buying a reportable amount of grain. We're not seeing that so much this year. Do you guys take that into consideration as well?
I mean, that's more world board stuff. My agency, we have a fairly narrow lane. We're focusing on what is produced here in the United States. The world board looks at what's going on in other countries. They look at the demand and who's importing and who's buying, and then they try and make projections as to how that's going to affect the price.
I gotcha. Well, that's really all I got. Does anyone have any questions? Not so much. Well, I hope that covered everything. So I appreciate your time, Brad, and thanks for taking the time to clarify a few things. And
You're welcome. Could I make a closing remark?
Go for it.
So we talked about the different sources that we use. I just want to really emphasize how much we need farmers to respond to the surveys that we do. And I know it's a pain when we call you at dinner time, or when we call you when you're getting your tractors ready, or you know, you've got a ton of work to do and here's somebody from the government calling you. But hopefully people understand the importance of this. And right now, I think is a prime example of why this is so important. We're looking at a really good crop this year. And fortunately, we're looking at a combination of good crop and pretty decent prices. We don't set numbers to try and, you know, take anybody into consideration over anybody else. We just try and set the best number that we can. But I grew up on a farm. I'm thrilled to see farmers succeed. Love to see, you know, farmers do well. But you know, this is a prime example of why this is important, because you're going to have a big crop. And there's a ton of logistics that's going to go into harvesting the crop, getting it to the elevators, getting it on the barges, getting it overseas to the foreign markets. So right now, I can guarantee you there are buyers out there who are going, where am I going to store all this? I'm probably going to have to put some on the ground. Where am I going to get the trucks, the barges? You know, how long is it going to take me to get this shipped out? And that's why it's so important to have real-time information so people can make those plans. And again, I go back to the farmer. You know, we have satellite images. We have all kinds of computer technology. Nobody knows the crop better than the people who are producing it. That's why we go to you. We also want you to get a fair shake in the marketplace. And so you can kind of pencil in, you know, what your revenue is going to be that year and make the necessary plans for your operation. So it all ties together. It's all important. But we need you to help us, help you make our reports as accurate as possible.
Do pretty much all farmers get the survey request?
Do pretty much all of them do it?
Get the survey request?
At one time or another, they will. It leans more towards bigger farmers. Bigger farmers have more weight. You know, if you farm north of 1,000 acres, you have a bigger chunk of the total production than folks that, you know, farm a couple hundred acres. So really, really big farmers get hit more often than smaller farmers, just because, again, we want to capture as much of the actual production in our estimate as we can without going to you every single month. But ultimately, you know, big farmers are selected at a higher sampling rate than smaller farmers.
Do you guys worry that the data could be skewed?
We're always worried about bias in the data, and we're always looking at ways to highlight that, understand that, and to account for that. But yeah, that's just some of the challenges in my world, is because we can't do a complete census every single time. Our surveys are voluntary, so farmers do not have to respond if they don't want to. So, you know, we're constantly looking at ways to ensure our numbers are accurate. That's one of the reasons why we have the objective yield program, is because I don't need a farmer to, you know, respond. I need his permission to get in his field, obviously, but I don't have to call him and bother him, and I don't have to worry about, you know, somebody's opinion being off. We're letting the crop speak for itself. Another thing we do at the end of the year to help ensure we're being accurate is we track the usage, and in particular soybeans. Soybeans either gets crushed or it gets exported. So we look at what gets crushed, we track what gets exported, we compare that back to the production estimates that we set. We have the same methodological procedures for corn as soybeans and wheat. And so that gives us a really good indication as to our accuracy as well.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Julie Burgott, and I'm from the Ipswich, South Dakota area. And we're in a drought up here in this area this year. But my question is this, you know, there's a very high percentage of participation in farm programs, FSA amongst most growers. I think it's 90-some%, you know, even closer to 100%. I'm thinking it's 97 to 98% participation in farm programs. So when they participate, the requirement is acreage reporting. So all acres are reported accurately. And actually, I used to work for FSA, so I know how, you know, accountable and how reliable farmers are at reporting acres. And so the FSA acres, I think, are very reliable, very valid. And in turn, so are the RMA, the crop insurance acres, because there aren't very many of those acres that go on insured each year. So when NASS is looking at acres and they're looking at the FSA reported acres, the RMA reported acres, where does NASS fall in line with when they look at those? Do they use those for acre per acre, or you come off of that somewhat? Where is there a deviation?
We absolutely look at those, and that's, you know, we just talked about how you know, we opened that door here in September. We typically don't look at acres until October, but because we were able to get the FSA data a little quicker this year than usual, we opened the door for acreage changes this year. We absolutely look at it, and I totally agree. It's a very, very strong indication. We do have to have some buffer. Corn, for example, there are dairies that grow corn for silage and don't, you know, sign it up in a particular program. And there are some people who just self-insure. I've talked to, well, I remember a conversation I had with one really big farmer who said he was out of compliance with some NRCS rules and regulations and was not eligible to sign up for government programs. So he just doesn't. So we know our numbers should cover and be a little bit bigger than what FSA has, but not by much, because like you said, the vast majority of farmers, especially major grain producers in the Corn Belt, they're signing up for something.
Can I just make another comment, Brad?
Sure, absolutely.
In working with farmers for, now I'm dating myself, over 25 years, through FSA, crop insurance, and my husband and I are also farmers. We have a grain and livestock farming operation. I'm just saying that, you know, when people in my own situation or our own situation, you know, why, if I'm reporting to FSA acre for acre to the 10th of the acre on every CLU of land that we operate, and I in turn report, to crop insurance on every acre that we insure. And, which we need the risk protection on. What incentive do I have, or what purpose would I have to now additionally report to USDA-NASS when I've already kind of jumped through the other two hoops? To me, if I've already done it, why should I do it a third time?
Great question. I get it often. And it's all about what I mentioned earlier, that snapshot in time. Our first estimate of planted acreage comes in March. Farmers have not, in many cases, probably most cases, have not reported to FSA what they intend to plant in March. So we would not be able to pull that from FSA, even if we had a real-time way to pull it. And as we discussed also earlier, our estimates are reflecting a specific date, like our March report is reflecting March 1st. The report that just came out today is reflecting September 1st. So farmers have a wide window to report the acreage that they're signing up. So that's one thing. So it's really, really hard to have any particular reference point, single reference point, because we're given snapshots throughout the year. March 1st, June 1st, then August, September, October, November, and December. Things can change along that way as well. So there's the acreage thing, which farmers have a wide window to sign up for. They don't sign up in March. If they sign up but get flooded out or don't get it planted, that can change, what actually happened as opposed to what got signed up. So there's just a ton of things that don't get reflected in the information that is given to FSA that we try to reflect in our regular reports. The other thing is the yield. You're not reporting your yield to FSA until, or you're reporting it to RMA after the fact. But, we're trying to get that snapshot as to what the yield's going to be on August 1st, September 1st, October 1st, November 1st, and then December. Again, the situation is continually evolving. You have weather, you have hurricanes, you have all kinds of things that can affect it. We're trying to provide that routine, periodic snapshot in time that FSA just does not capture. So that's why we need to do what we do. I don't like the burden that it causes on farmers, believe me. I wish we could just pull it all from FSA one time and be done, but that would not reflect the different changes throughout the year and how the crop is evolving and how things are looking along the way. Does that make sense, Julie?
Yes, it definitely does. You've put a different light on it for me, because like I said, we've kind of, I like to kind of sometimes refer to us as circus poodles. We just keep jumping through hoops, but you are exactly right. When you look at your March, you have really not a lot to go off of unless somebody is giving you some indication of what the intentions are. The only other comment I have then is, on validity, but I guess it all kind of works out in and through time. But because through FSA, there's compliance, and as well through crop insurance, there's all sorts of compliance sorts of things where things get, a grower is audited for this purpose or that purpose and has to verify things. But when it comes to NASS, there's, sometimes the validity could be, like the word Mark used a little earlier, skewed.
And we have tools to check. We have, we do share information with FSA, and actually we have access to FSA's database. So if a farmer reports something to us that just looks different, we have what they've reported to us in the past. And so we can go into the FSA database and say, well, what did they sign up for? And does this make sense? And sometimes we call people back. So we have historic reports from farmers. We do have access to FSA data. And we have a number of ways to, give us some clues as to whether or not we're getting the full accurate information or not. Do we catch them all? No. But in the world of statistics, you hope that the folks that aren't 100% accurate, that some of them are a little high. You hope that some of them are a little low so that it kind of washes out in the end. And that's really why we call this an estimate, because there's going to be noise in the data, but hopefully by the time it all washes out, we're pretty close to the truth in the end.
I thank you for your time this afternoon and answering my questions.
You bet, anytime.
I had one other question. What percentage of farms are not in the farm program?
Well, it depends on the commodity and it depends on the state. For corn farmers in Illinois, it's high 90s are registered for programs. Now, when you get into other minor commodities, wheat or, you know, Illinois is the #1 producer of pumpkins. I'm not aware of a so again, it just depends on the commodity, the state, and you know how important that particular program is to the producers producing it. But for major grain producers, it's in the high 90s in most states.
Why? I guess explain to me why someone wouldn't be in the farm program.
Well, like I mentioned, as far as corn goes, there's dairy farmers who just grow it for silage, so they're planting corn acres as part of our planted acreage. They're just not harvesting it for grain. Again, and I talked to a big farmer. Some farmers self-insure. They just don't want to mess with government crop insurance. You know, it is expensive, and they've got enough cash to just self-insure. And then, you know, like I mentioned, the example of I talked to a guy who was out of compliance. He, you know, had some issues with tiling. You know, and you guys who farm know way more about this than I do, but I know there's certain rules and regulations about drainage and maintaining buffer zones between waterways, and he had some issues that, you know, got him out of compliance, and he just didn't want to invest the money to get in compliance, and so he self-insures as a result of that.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Does anyone else have any questions? A lot less people than actually signed up, so I guess everyone was checked out after the markets today. It was a good USDA report.
Hopefully they'll all view the recording, Mark.
I bet if we were down a bunch, that'd be a shitload.
Yeah, and be lined up trying to skewer me.
No, I appreciate your time, man. Brad, I know you got a lot going on, so I appreciate
Hey, that's all right. That's part of my job, is to interface with the public, so I'm happy to do it.
All righty. If no one else has questions, then I will end the meeting there.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you, Brad.